Is Ms. Soucie?
Soucie.
Soucie. Okay,
Soucie.
sorry about that.
It's
If you just let us know
mouthful.
where you're from, what you do, and try to get to the essence of why you're here.
Hale Soucie.
Hale
That's Hale, Soucie, SOU, as in cat, IE. And okay, so I live in Smyrna, Georgia. Me and my wife live up there. I actually do digital marketing for car dealers, but I was a volunteer for the recount process to go as one of the monitors. I started off at Cobb County, and there was definitely some interesting stuff that I saw there, but most of what I want to focus on is Fulton, so I'll try to be as concise as possible about Cobb County. One of the most disturbing things that I saw in Cobb County on the first day is that they were using an electronic counting machine, and we were told that that was not supposed to be the case. I did notice that the next day it was not there. When I first came onto the floor, I was standing at one table, and from 209 to 212, I was taking notes as I went, from 209 to 212, the first auditor, how the process goes is the first auditor reads off who the vote was for, the second auditor confirms it. Well, 3 times from 209 to 212, 3 times in 3 minutes, the first auditor called a Trump vote for Biden. Now, the second person who was checking it, the process worked, she caught that. Well, the reason I left that table is because someone told me that at one of the other tables they were not double checking. So I went over there, and very quickly I observed that she was not double checking, went and told the people who were in charge, as I was advised to do. They said they would say something to her. When I came back around the room, she was still not double checking. So as I came up behind her, she saw that I was looking at her, and she started very exaggeratedly putting it in her face. And so, hey, that's fine. I was content that she was at least checking. But as I walked away, I turned around and noticed that she was staring at me. As I kept going around the room, more of the auditors were becoming aware of me. They were calling their bosses over. They were pointing me out. And as I walked up behind her, I heard her saying to one of the other people that I'm paid by the taxpayer, and this is a quote, "I'm paid by the taxpayer, and this effing a-hole wants to come in here and watch me." So last I checked, I'm a taxpayer. So I just want to come, volunteer and check this process. Well, very quickly, if that wasn't enough, I go down to Fulton County the next day, and I actually have with me, this is the letter that's supposed to permit me to go out onto the floor so that I can be close to the process. Well, I still have this letter because no one ever checked it. When I walked into the basement of the World Congress Center, there was an unattended notepad, and that was it. And so I was able to walk directly on the floor. And what I'm mainly here to tell you today is that within the first 30 seconds of me being there, they had runners who would take the suitcases full of ballots out to the tables with the 2 auditors on it to count. Within 30 seconds of me walking in, I signed my name on the notepad, walked up, and a gentleman came up to me with a suitcase full of votes, and he said, "Hey, I was supposed to take these to table 96, but they already have one. I don't know what to do with it." And he rolled the suitcase forward me and offered me for me to take it. So this suitcase, anywhere between, I've heard the numbers between 6,000 and 15,000 ballots was offered to me. And it kept me up that night, quite frankly, because if I was somebody dishonest, very easily could you have walked out of that center with that. So that was just one thing that I observed. Several other tables, we solved a bunch of different issues. I was actually Ms. Susie Voiles, who gave her testimony here earlier today about the pristine ballots. I was one of the monitors who was told to step away from the table while she was looking at that. And I do have photographs of those ballots, and you can see that they're flat. Another table had over an 8 to 10 inch tall stack of votes that are purely for Biden, not a single Trump vote. And I work with data digital marketing, and anytime we start having a number that approaches the 90th percentile, you get a little bit wary about that when it comes to consumer data. Now, for 100%, that's passing in probability, and it's approaching impossibility. There were several other tables where they were not double checking. There was one table where the women had their purses on the table. These purses were not checked. There was one set of people who were taking them out of the suitcase, counting them, and then putting them back in to the suitcase. And so I guess the main thing that I want to focus on is the chain of custody for these ballots. They're all stored in suitcases at the front of the room. Clearly, they're being offered to people who shouldn't be having them, but also they have a little placard on them that tells the time and date that's supposed to secure the integrity of when they were open. And of a majority, I would say a majority of the ones that I observed did not have any of that information filled out. So I've got my sworn affidavit here, and I think that's the main things that I wanted to cover.
Okay. Senator Dolezal has a question for you. You're number 5.
You got it. Good job. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
It's Hale Soucie. That's
Hale.
Hale Soucie.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for
Nice
being
to
here
meet you.
today.
Thank you.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about the recount in Fulton County. Senator Beach and I had the opportunity to go down and observe it as well. And I'm curious if you could maybe corroborate some of the things that I saw. How would you describe? I think the thing that struck me the most was the abject lack of security in that room. And you referenced that earlier with you basically could walk in and walk onto the floor.
Absolutely.
I literally saw a person, and I used to work in the music business, and it reminded me of our concert type security people that, are not always awake on the job, if you will. But as you know, there's those large doors in the back of I think it was Hall B, if I remember correctly, is where the counting was taking place, at the World Congress Center, and there was a person. But I noticed that there were stacks of this. We're calling them suitcases, but really they're kind of they're large rolling cases.
Yeah, I've settled on
right?
suitcases. I don't
Yeah.
know what to call them.
Against the back hall, there were some up at the front. There were some behind the Arlo system, et cetera. I'm curious, in your whole time being there, you were not, you were there as an observer, not as a poll worker, correct? You
Yes,
were there.
that's correct. I was
Were
just
you
as an
ever
observer.
stopped and asked who you were? Were you ever credentialed? Were you ever checked in and out? Were you ever?
The only time that I had any kind of contact with people there, they asked me to step away from Susie Voil's table. And then I did. So no one ever checked credentials. And I should have mentioned this. I apologize. That they were flipping over their piece of paper that have the batch number on them. And I asked one of the election officials, hey, how can I see the batch number when I'm not supposed to talk to the people? And they said, well, you're not supposed to be close enough to see the batch number. So those 3 times are the only time that I ever spoke to anybody or anybody ever spoke to me or approached me.
What did you observe relative? Unpack this chain of custody issue a little bit more. You mentioned they weren't signed in, they weren't signed out. And I'm not trying to lead you, but I'm telling you that what I observed was basically these cases were scattered throughout the room with no rhyme or reason that I could discern. Were you able to decipher kind of the process at which they were at least moving things from start to finish?
So I would 100% agree. I was actually trying to find it in my affidavit. There was one table that I saw had 2 suitcases of ballots, which we were told was never supposed to happen. So as far as I was able to surmise, the process is the people would sit at the auditors, the people who are counting the votes, would raise their paper when they were ready for another suitcase, that's what we settled on, suitcase of ballots. Then a runner would go up, check that out, and bring it to them. And the same process would continue. They would raise a different piece of paper if they had a question. The entire place there's over 200 tables, I believe, and it's, as you saw, it's very huge. But even that process was having breakdowns in it.
Yeah, so I mean, I would estimate that room was probably 100,000 square feet. It was massive, and I think there were actually 300 and something tables.
Okay, so
How many?
at least 200.
Do you know how many of you were allowed on the floor? In other words, Republican, Democrat, Independent,
So at Cobb County, they limited us to 4. They only allowed 4 of us onto the floor. At Fulton, no one even knew who I was because I just walked onto the floor. No one was confirming who I was.
Were you able to identify how many other poll watchers were there from either party?
The DNC people were pretty clearly labeled, and I can see that, and most of the RNC people looked pretty shell-shocked, so they were easy to pick out.
Okay, thank
There
you.
was not too many.
Okay. Senator Heath?
Just curious if, if the legislature is called on to conduct further investigation to make a statement of fact, do you have a photo that would somehow
Of which part?
validate that you were, in fact, on the floor in Fulton County? I mean, I don't doubt what you're saying, but if we were
so-
really going to pursue this, can you prove to me that you were there?
Yes, I took several photos,
Okay.
and yes,
Thank you.
and a reporter actually filmed me there too. So
Senator Gooch?
Quick question.
do we have video? Security video as well, and then there was somebody who was recording, and I was in several recordings. Sorry.
You may have answered this, and I wasn't hearing you. While you were on the floor, did you see anyone from the Secretary of State's office?
No,
No state officials?
no, not that I was aware.
Okay.
And this is actually my first time giving this statement because I had reached out to several different people, called, called hotlines, submitted my affidavit, and no one seemed interested.
Have you written a letter to the Secretary's office?
I have not. I called the hotline. That's
Okay.
what I was told to do.
Okay. No emails?
I've sent several emails to different people, and this is a notarized affidavit that I got.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we got it. All right, we'll get your contact information. I mean,
Sure.
we have that, so thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me.
Appreciate it. Thank you for being here. All right, our next is Annette Jackson. Thank you.
Oh, I got a slide